You open your eyes. The world is strangely calm, coated in a soft golden haze. You inhale deeply without thinking, but something is wrong. The air carries a warmth, a sweetness, and a slowness that tugs at your thoughts. It is not smoke. It is not fog. It is cannabis. You are not high because you chose to be. You are high because the world has changed, and now every breath you take forces you further away from who you were. There are no sober decisions left, no safe spaces, no clarity, no escape. This is not about recreation or choice. This is about survival in a world that constantly invades your mind and rewires your reality, and you will not make it. It is the year 2028, and you are a time traveler, sent to witness a strange and unsettling future. A freak global incident, triggered by a hybrid strain of genetically engineered cannabis escaping biodomes in South America and Eastern Europe, has forever altered Earth's atmosphere. The compound, once celebrated and debated, is now uncontainable. Carried by transcontinental jet streams and accelerated by warming climates, the psychoactive elements of THC have saturated the air itself. Every breath you take draws you deeper into its effects. The entire planet is now enveloped in an invisible cloud of continuous intoxication. What was once a choice is now a constant. Whether you are on a mountaintop, inside a secured building, or buried underground, the molecules find you. Masks help for a time, but filters fail. Isolation chambers run out of power. Your mind is no longer yours, not entirely. What starts as subtle distraction morphs into overwhelming confusion. This world runs not on logic, but on the altered perceptions of billions of compromised minds. This video will take you through the unraveling of that world, step by step. You will walk the foggy streets of cities, stuck in euphoric paralysis. You will meet children born into this chemical haze, unable to form memories. You will see governments fail, economies grind to a halt, ecosystems transform, and identity itself dissolve into psychotropic fog. In this hypothetical scenario, the cannabis is not smoked, vaped, or consumed. It is breathed in constantly. And whether you are a scientist, a soldier, or a child, the outcome remains the same. Because in a world where the air you breathe clouds your mind, where hallucination becomes more real than truth, and where no moment is free of distortion, survival is not about strength. It is about clarity, and clarity is extinct. Let us begin where the shift started. When the first people noticed that the world's air was no longer just oxygen, it was something far more invasive. You step into the year 2028, arriving in the early hours of a Tuesday morning, somewhere just outside Buenos Aires. The air is thick, not with smog or rain, but something that feels almost velvet-like. At first, it is easy to ignore. The skies are unusually still. There are no birds chirping, no rush of morning commuters, just a dense, golden tint that seems to hang low between buildings, especially near the rooftops of vast indoor greenhouses that sprawl for blocks. The world's largest cannabis farms, funded by multinational pharmaceutical giants, were built here to maximize yield and scale production for global medicinal use. But what nobody expected was the chain reaction triggered by a new strain, MX43, a hyperpotent, aerosolized variant bred, not for ingestion, but for industrial vapor extraction. It was meant to revolutionize chronic pain treatment. Instead, it ruptured containment protocols and began escaping first through broken ventilation units, then through airways, waterways, and eventually into the jet stream itself. At ground level, the transformation starts subtly. People report a soft humming in their ears, a warmth in their fingertips, and an odd sense of calm. Even in typically chaotic city streets, you watch as construction workers abandon their drills mid-sentence, simply forgetting what they were doing. Traffic slows, not out of congestion, but because drivers find themselves lost in thought, eyes fixed on the sunrise that now glows with a strange, rose-colored hue. The local news plays in the background of a shop window. The anchors are unusually slow in their delivery, frequently pausing mid-sentence, smiling as if recalling a forgotten memory. At first, it feels harmless, like a collective dream shared across the population. But then, an eerie uniformity emerges. Everyone is mellow, too mellow. The entire district moves like molasses. Conversations become vague, and no one reacts to alarms, car crashes, or even open flames. It takes less than a week for the symptoms to spread globally. Flight corridors begin reporting strange behavior from pilots, drifting altitudes, misread instruments, forgotten coordinates. Ground control demands clarity, but responses come delayed and slurred. Airlines ground flights indefinitely, assuming a viral outbreak. Scientists begin collecting air samples. What they find shocks them. They are cumulative. Each breath you take reinforces the last. And worse, there is no natural half-life in open environments. The Earth, essentially, has become a global hotbox. You find yourself in Sao Paulo next, where public transit has shut down entirely. Trains no longer run, not because of mechanical failure, but because control room operators keep forgetting to dispatch them. Citywide alerts are sent out by emergency services, advising people to stay indoors. But it is too late. Homes, offices, hospitals, none are airtight. The haze seeps in through every crack, vent, and window. It clings to skin, to fabric, to lungs. Children begin to laugh uncontrollably for hours, then fall into quiet spells of withdrawal. The elderly report seeing people who are not there, speaking to shadows, unable to distinguish between memory and moment. In Paris, a member of parliament collapses mid-speech, not from illness, but because she forgot where she was, who she was addressing, and why she was even speaking. The scientific community scrambles for answers. In Berlin, a task force of neurobiologists tries to identify whether prolonged exposure leads to permanent alteration of the brain's endocannabinoid system. Their early reports are bleak. Cognitive regression begins as early as 2 weeks, and after 3 months, individuals demonstrate early signs of cannabinoid-induced neuroplastic reprogramming. In plain terms, the brain begins to rewire itself as if it was permanently intoxicated. Basic neural tasks, such as spatial awareness, linguistic fluency, and short-term memory, degrade. What is most alarming, however, is the collective apathy that follows. People no longer care that they are fading. There is no panic, only disinterest. You visit a once bustling Tokyo tech district, now eerily serene. People sit cross-legged on sidewalks, smiling to themselves, staring at floating motes of dust illuminated by the golden haze. Vending machines beep endlessly, untouched. Storefronts remain open, yet no purchases are made. You hear the distant, echoing strum of a guitar. Around the corner, a young man plays to a non-existent audience, his eyes closed, his fingers lazily brushing the strings. It feels like a dream you cannot wake from, not because it is comforting, but because it has become all-encompassing. Time has become a suggestion. Purpose has become irrelevant. Governments, at first reluctant to admit the scope of the problem, begin issuing statements urging calm and cooperation. International coalitions are formed to develop mass-scale filtration devices. Oxygen vaults are created in bunkers and repurposed subway tunnels, offering temporary clarity to critical personnel. But they are few, expensive, and already overwhelmed. Meanwhile, cities begin retrofitting old Cold War shelters into breathable compounds, but the effort is futile. Even the deepest installations report trace cannabinoid presence within days. The Earth's atmosphere, climate scientists confirm, has been fully compromised. Rain carries microdoses. Soil begins absorbing the compound. Plants start showing signs of chemical bonding with THC particles, evolving to host and spread it through pollen. You wander into a church in Boston. No one in the pews seems to notice. They are transfixed, smiling gently, as if listening to something far deeper than the words being said. Some are humming quietly. Others are asleep with their eyes open. You feel the weight of the air pressing on your temples, your vision softening at the edges. You try to recall why you came here or what day it is, but those facts no longer matter. There is only now, and it is smothered in green mist. What happens next is not a collapse through violence, but a surrender through softness. Because when your mind is no longer your own, the next thing to fall is your ability to function, and that decline begins in your brain. You sit in a plastic chair, trying to focus on the blinking terminal screen in front of you. The hospital room is quiet, except for the faint buzzing of fluorescent lights overhead and the rhythmic breathing of patients nearby. You're in one of the few remaining lucidity stations, a makeshift clinic tucked beneath an old metro tunnel in downtown Seoul. Thick air filters hum in the corners, struggling to keep the oxygen clean. You are here for cognitive testing, and for the first time in weeks, you feel almost clear until the technician forgets your name halfway through the session. He smiles blankly at you, then stares at the floor as if he just remembered a dream he never had. His clipboard slips from his hand. He does not pick it up. This is what has become of the human mind in 2028, under constant cannabis exposure. Your brain never gets a break. There is no chemical reset, no sober baseline. THC, once metabolized and filtered naturally by the liver and kidneys, now enters through every breath, every second. It crosses the blood-brain barrier relentlessly, and worse. It binds to receptors in places that were never designed to handle this level of saturation. At first, it is minor. Short-term memory lapses, brief confusion, soft laughter at nothing. But within weeks, your hippocampus, responsible for memory formation, starts to misfire. Memories become loose, blurry, misplaced. You know your mother's name, but not her face. You recall graduating school, but cannot remember the language of the ceremony. Within a month, emotional regulation debiases. You laugh during funerals, weep during breakfast, and forget why you were angry even before you finish shouting. Your frontal lobe, the seat of decision-making and impulse control, becomes unreliable. You decide to go shopping, but never make it out the door. You reach for a glass of water, then forget what you were holding. In the early days, this was called cannafog, a term coined on social media that quickly trended worldwide. But now, no one posts anymore. The apps remain open on millions of phones, but the users stare at them without input, Some swipe aimlessly. Others place their phones on their foreheads, believing the heat will keep thoughts in place. For children, the situation is worse. Developing brains are vulnerable, neuroplastic, and still wiring the most critical cognitive functions. As you walk through a public school in Chicago, you see a classroom filled with children staring at bright paintings they created just hours earlier, yet none of them remember doing it. A girl whispers to a wall, gently petting it as if it were a dog. A boy raises his hand to answer a question that was never asked. The teacher, herself, no older than 24, speaks softly about the color blue, as if it is the key to everything. She repeats the phrase, "The sky is inside us," over and over, smiling as tears stream down her cheeks. Doctors try to adapt, using neurostimulants and dopamine regulators, but the results are inconsistent. Some regain short bursts of focus, only to collapse from neurological exhaustion hours later. Others experience aggressive mood swings, lashing out, then freezing mid-sentence, as if their minds crashed like a glitched program. You witness a case in Munich, where a retired pilot recites radio tower frequencies flawlessly, but forgets his own children. His brain has become a vault of useless fragments, unable to form new connections. One of the most terrifying aspects of this neurological decline is not the forgetfulness, but the illusion of clarity. Under constant THC exposure, the brain manufactures narratives, beliefs, and emotions without grounding them in reality. A woman in Cape Town believes she is still on a cruise ship, despite being surrounded by collapsed apartment buildings. A man in Bangkok insists he just woke from a dream where he was the president of Earth, and begins giving speeches to abandoned mannequins in a department store. These are not hallucinations in the traditional sense. They are constructed realities, stitched together by a brain desperate to make sense of the flood of stimuli. The amygdala, responsible for fear processing, is also corrupted. Many people no longer experience fear in a functional way. This leads to bizarre and dangerous behavior. People walk into burning buildings, attempt to swim across frozen rivers, or lie down in traffic without urgency. Emergency services have stopped responding in some cities, not due to logistics, but because their responders have joined the Haze. A firefighter in Montreal stands in full gear, watching a fire consume a home, softly singing lullabies to himself. A nurse in Delhi administers injections of saline to empty chairs, believing her patients are invisible angels. For the elderly, whose mental faculties were already in decline, the situation accelerates into irreversible states of detachment. Alzheimer's symptoms become rampant, not from age, but from chemical assault. Entire care homes now exist as silent wards of smiling, empty faces. You enter one in Lisbon. A man plays chess alone. His opponent is a sock puppet taped to a fork. A woman scribbles numbers across a wall with lipstick. The staff is gone. The residents are their own caretakers now, and no one knows where the cameras are pointed. Scientists across the globe race to map the changes in brain tissue. Autopsies of those who pass away reveal cortical thinning, loss of gray matter density, and abnormal growths of fatty tissue around cannabinoid receptors. There are whispers of a new psychiatric disorder, total cannabinoid dependency syndrome. It is not addiction in the classic sense, it is survival. The brain has rewritten itself to require intoxication in order to function at all. Sober minds, if they somehow escape exposure, begin to experience violent withdrawals, insomnia, tremors, hallucinations, and in some cases, death. Sober clarity, it seems, is now a poison in a world built on bliss. You witness an experimental neurolab in Cairo, where patients are strapped into blinking helmets designed to reset cognition through electromagnetic pulses. Some scream as forgotten memories surge back. Others fall silent, motionless, unable to reconcile who they were before the fog. A few become violent, attacking the doctors in a panic, crying about colors and sounds that no one else can hear. Perhaps the cruelest effect of all is how relationships begin to dissolve, not through conflict, but through erosion. Spouses forget each other's birthdays. Friends lose shared memories. Parents no longer remember bedtime stories. As you stand on a rooftop in Barcelona, you watch a man propose to his wife. She nods happily, unaware they have been married for 12 years. He forgets as well a moment later. They embrace, then walk away in opposite directions, each smiling, each unaware they are lost. There are no tears in this world, no screaming, no riots, just laughter at nothing, smiles at shadows, and the dull ache of a mind trying to remember why it used to matter. You, the traveler, start to feel it too. Your thoughts slow. Your vocabulary shortens. You try to recall the year, the city, your mission, but all that remains is a feeling, like something soft pressing against the inside of your skull. You are not frightened. That part of your brain is gone. You are just here. And as the mind begins to dissolve, the structures built upon it soon follow. Because without focus, direction, or memory, society itself has no chance. Up next is the collapse of everything humanity once relied on to function. You arrive in New York City just after sunrise. But this is not the city that never sleeps. It is now a city that never wakes. Office buildings loom in silence, their glass exteriors streaked with dew and dust. The streets are not empty, but strangely unlit. Delivery trucks are parked mid-lane, with engines off, their drivers reclining against the wheels, gazing at the sky like they are watching an invisible ballet. The traffic lights still change, but no one obeys. There are no honking horns, no urgent footfalls. The usual chaos is replaced with an ambient lull that feels eerily choreographed, like the world has fallen into a synchronized daydream. You step into a corporate headquarters, one of the remaining hubs for digital infrastructure. Monitors still glow, calendars still flash meeting reminders, but no one is typing. Rows of employees sit in ergonomic chairs, eyes half-lidded, fingers resting on keyboards without motion. A woman next to you murmurs a sentence, then trails off and begins drawing loops on her notepad. A man stares at a spreadsheet filled with numbers that no longer align. He chuckles quietly, as if they're a private joke. You check the time. 10:17 a.m. The daily sync meeting has been delayed by over a week, and no one seems to care. In the factories of Guangzhou, conveyor belts groan to a halt, not because of mechanical failure, but because the workers cannot maintain their pace. Motors still whir, robotic arms still twitch, but the rhythm of human supervision is broken. Assembly lines that once produced smartphones by the second now drip out half-built devices. Many never completed, their shells warped from inconsistent inputs. Maintenance logs are incomplete, filled with repeated letters and symbols that make no sense. Supervisors sit on crates, humming lullabies from their childhoods. One man spins a screwdriver in his hand for hours, never using it. The collapse of productivity is not loud, it is not violent, it is invisible, insidious. Things simply stop happening. Grocery shelves remain stocked, not because of efficient supply chains, but because no one remembers to shop. Customers wander in and out of stores, some carrying items they never pay for, others forgetting why they entered in the first place. In a supermarket in Oslo, a woman stands in the frozen food aisle holding a box of fish fingers. She is smiling, softly repeating the word "see," while tears roll down her face. No one interrupts her. The cashier is asleep with her eyes open. Without routine, structure begins to dissolve. Schools transform into holding spaces where teachers and students exist side by side in mutual disconnection. In Snow Paulo, an economics class is in session, but the lecturer simply walks in circles, describing the sound of rain. No one corrects him. The students doodle in their notebooks, most of which are filled with spirals and stars. The few who remain coherent attempt to concentrate, but find themselves unable to string together more than a few minutes of focused thought. Assignments are no longer graded. Tests are not distributed. Graduation becomes an event no one remembers to organize. Governments scramble to preserve basic operations. National emergency broadcasts attempt to inform citizens about oxygen-rich safe zones, but the addresses are mispronounced, the phone numbers mistyped, and the announcements repeated with eerie, childlike musical cues in the background. Parliament sessions in London break down into whispered monologues and forgotten votes. Leaders mumble ceremonial language and ask irrelevant questions. Public policy becomes impossible. Without clarity, intention disintegrates. Lawmakers propose bills they cannot explain, sign documents they cannot read, and eventually stop showing up entirely. Banks cease operations when key employees forget access codes. Security algorithms lock out thousands of systems simultaneously. ATM networks flash indecipherable messages. One shows a drawing of a tree, another, a single phrase. Remember when it was quiet. In Tokyo, an entire financial district goes dark when a failed server reset shuts down communications. No one is fired. No one is held accountable. There is no structure left to enforce punishment or reward. Paychecks stop arriving. Utility bills are no longer printed. The machines keep running, but the humans required to maintain them simply forget their roles. In agriculture, the consequences are just as catastrophic. Farmers in the Midwest stare at their fields, unsure of which crops they planted. Irrigation systems are manually adjusted in reverse, flooding dry patches and starving green zones. Harvest cycles are missed, sometimes altogether. Grain silos overflow while empty pantries line the towns nearby. In Africa, aid convoys arrive at checkpoints where no one is present to receive them. Crates of rice rot in the sun. Meanwhile, local governments forget they requested the aid at all. The medical sector collapses next. Hospitals become zones of tranquil disaster. Nurses move like ghosts through halls lined with patients whose names are no longer logged. Monitors beep without urgency. Charts remain unfilled. A patient in Cairo lies on a gurney for 3 days, unnoticed, until a janitor calls for help, then forgets why he called. In the ICU of a Berlin clinic, a doctor gently recites poetry over a dying man, unaware that he should be administering oxygen. Surgery theaters are converted into sleep pods, where the scent of sterilization masks the faint perfume of ambient haze drifting in through vents. And what about the service industry? Cafes become lounges where patrons sit for hours, ordering nothing, watching shadows pass across walls. Baristas forget how to make coffee. Chefs stare into boiling pots and talk to themselves. In Istanbul, a restaurant continues to take reservations for non-existent tables. The hostess smiles at the guests, then walks away mid-conversation. There are no complaints. Everyone has forgotten what they were expecting. Productivity is not just about movement. It is about continuity, foresight, cause and effect. These are mental processes dependent on memory, attention, and motivation, all now compromised. Without them, society becomes a sculpture left in the rain, familiar in shape, but slowly eroding from within. You begin to see how fragile the machine was. The entire global system ran on unspoken assumptions that people would wake up, remember their roles, act accordingly. Now, there are no consequences for inaction because no one remembers the plans that were made. The digital world collapses with equal quiet. Social media apps remain open, but engagement ceases. You see millions of users posting the same photo of a leaf, or a shoe, or a stranger's smile. The algorithms try to adapt, suggesting content that no longer exists. Search engines return errors. News websites post the same headline for 10 consecutive days. Everything is fine. A few AI systems continue to operate, but even they falter without human guidance. Auto-generated emails spiral into nonsense. Newsletters become blank PDFs. Customer service bots loop endlessly, asking the same question over and over. The entertainment industry transforms into a whispering echo of its former self. Movie sets are abandoned mid-shoot. Actors forget their lines and instead improvise strange, haunting monologues about memories that were never theirs. In one studio, cameras continue to roll, capturing hours of footage of a director pacing in circles, whispering about a dream he had when he was 6. Streaming platforms run out of new content. Live concerts become ambient sessions of musicians repeating the same chord until the crowd falls asleep on the floor. Even religion, long a bastion of ritual and memory, becomes fractured. Sermons lose structure. Pilgrimages are forgotten. Hymns are sung backward. In Vatican City, monks chant in silence, their lips moving to a rhythm that no longer matches the original scripture. Temples are filled with incense, but no intention. Faith, in a world stripped of memory and reason, becomes a gesture without context. And yet, the world does not end in fire or ice. It ends in stillness. Not because people gave up, but because they forgot what they were doing. It is not chaos. It is peaceful collapse. You walk through a city once fueled by deadlines, now lulled into a dream from which no one wakes. The collapse of productivity is not the end of the world, but the end of movement, ambition, creation. You stand still, like everyone else, unsure of what comes next. And as systems fall quiet, the streets take on a new kind of life, not with order, but with wandering minds and vacant smiles. The next chapter takes you into the open, where the public world has turned into a surreal playground for the blissed and the broken. You walk outside into a world that feels like a museum of moments. The air is warm and heavy, with the ever-present veil of THC saturating every alley, every boulevard, every open plaza. The sun filters through the haze like a soft bulb behind frosted glass. The scent of the atmosphere is sweet and earthy, like freshly crushed herbs laced with rain, and it clings to your nostrils with every breath. As you move down the avenue, you notice the faces. They are not sad, They are not afraid. They are suspended, like puppets, abandoned mid-performance, smiling at nothing, eyes glinting with vacant delight. The streets are not deserted. They are full of people, but it is a different kind of life, one without intent. A man in a business suit dances alone in the middle of an intersection, swaying with no music. Beside him, a woman sits barefoot on a curb, painting shapes on the sidewalk, using a bottle of melted ice cream. Children play hopscotch without numbers. A group of teens lie motionless on the hood of a car, watching the sky as if expecting it to change channels. You try to speak to one of them, but he raises a finger to your lips and whispers, "She." The sky is telling stories. Everything in this world is in slow motion. Traffic lights cycle endlessly, though no one drives. Crosswalk signs, flash walk, and don't walk in infinite contradiction. Advertisements on giant digital screens loop without audio. One billboard shows a single sentence, over and over. You are safe, you are safe, you are safe. But there is no one left who questions it. No one protests, no one objects, because objection requires a sense of injustice, and injustice requires memory, purpose, urgency, all of which are gone. The architecture itself is being reclaimed. Buildings are not collapsing, but eroding in their own way. Windows left open let the haze in. Offices are cluttered with soft objects, cushions, toys, blankets. City halls resemble daycare centers. Desks are covered in feathers, fabric, and dried leaves. The once steely infrastructure has softened to reflect the people within. Public libraries have turned into nap havens where people lie across books they no longer understand. Grocery stores are full, but customers wander the aisles, sometimes sniffing fruits, sometimes hugging loaves of bread. In this surreal calm, a new caste of people begins to emerge. The lucid. These are individuals whose tolerance is lower, whose minds resist the fog just enough to remain partially aware. But awareness is not freedom. Awareness is pain. The lucid walk through this world like ghosts, remembering what society once was, unable to function within what it has become. They wear goggles, masks, makeshift filters. Some speak to each other in code, afraid of being overheard. Others leave messages scrawled on walls. Wake up. This is not real, but no one reads them. Or if they do, they forget seconds later. You meet one such lucid man beneath a collapsed overpass in Los Angeles. He clutches a torn photograph of his daughter and begs you not to forget her face. But you've never seen her. He weeps not because he's afraid, but because he knows he will forget her soon too. His clarity is a curse. He remembers birthdays, cities, headlines, laughter, while the world around him hums in blissful ignorance. You ask him how he stays lucid. He lifts his sleeve, revealing a scarred arm where a crude oxygen pump has been taped down with electrical wire. Clean air, he whispers. 5 minutes a day, enough to remember my own name. These lucid wanderers are not heroes, they are mourners. They know the world has already ended, and they walk its ruins, while others smile at shadows. Some form underground groups, lucid cults that try to resist the haze. They build oxygen chambers in basements, record their thoughts onto analog tapes, and create maps of clean air locations. But their numbers dwindle. The haze finds them eventually, or they forget. Or worse, they join the crowd without realizing it. They become blissed, and the cult becomes one voice quieter. And then there are the broken. In alleyways, beneath overpasses, in the corners of city parks, you find the ones who could not adapt. their minds pushed too far. Not every brain can withstand constant neurological invasion. These individuals tremble, twitch, and babble incoherently. Some wear helmets of tinfoil and scream about static. Others repeat single words endlessly, like broken audio loops. Bird, 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 bird. They are not violent. They are not threats. They are warnings, fragments of human identity shattered by saturation. They are the unwanted proof that euphoria does not protect you from madness. It merely hides it for a while. Society pretends not to see them. Blissed pedestrians step over them gently, smile politely, and move on. No ambulances come. No shelters are open. The institutions of care have already dissolved. You witness one woman, half-clothed, her arms marked with ink and ash, singing a lullaby to a rock cradled in her arms. Beside her, a man builds towers out of chewing gum wrappers and sobs when they fall. You approach, but the haze pulls you back. It whispers to you in warm waves, asking you to forget, to let go, to stop caring. Art flourishes, but without structure. Street murals appear overnight, drawn in vibrant swirls and symbols no one can interpret. Sculptures of melted plastic and hair stand in plazas. Music plays from unseen speakers, slow, droning, hypnotic. You follow one melody to a former courthouse, now occupied by dozens of strangers lying motionless on yoga mats, eyes closed, breathing in unison. It is unclear whether they are meditating or simply lost. No one answers when you speak. A child walks up to you and places a flower behind your ear, then floats away into the mist. Communication breaks down slowly. Conversations are rare. Most people speak in riddles, fragments, dreams. Words like remember, blue, and yesterday are repeated often, though no one defines them. You ask for directions, and someone tells you. The wind knows the way. Another person says, close your eyes and walk backwards. These are not jokes, they are sincere. In this world, sincerity has been untethered from logic. At night, the cities glow brighter than before, not with electricity, but with bioluminescent graffiti, lead body paint, and drones shaped like birds. Fireworks go off in silence. Parades happen with no schedule. Couples waltz through empty fountains. And in the background, always, is the haze, soft, sweet, inescapable. It hums in your ears like a lullaby you cannot stop humming. You realize, walking through this world, that survival is not about food or shelter anymore. It is about identity, and identity requires clarity. But clarity is seen as a disease now. Those who try to explain, to remember, to warn, they are either ignored or absorbed. The haze is more powerful than truth, more comforting than fear, and far more persuasive than reason. As you look up, you see a giant drone display illuminating the sky, animated flowers blooming in the dark, followed by words written in light. Breathe deep, be free. Below it, the crowd applauds. You do not, because you remember what came before. But memory alone is not enough. In a world built on euphoric fog, the next generation will be born into the blur. What happens when children grow up, never knowing what it feels like to be sober? You arrive in what used to be a preschool in Vancouver. Bright colors cover the walls, handprints, smiling suns, rainbows, but there is something unsettling about the silence. Dozens of children sit cross-legged on cushions scattered across the floor, eyes unfocused, lips slightly parted, breathing in rhythm. A teacher moves slowly between them, trailing her fingers along the backs of their heads as if calming a restless herd. But the children are not restless. They are still, too still. The only sound is the whir of ceiling fans pushing warm, cannabinoid-saturated air around the room. This is no longer a learning environment. This is containment. Across the globe, children born after the saturation event are different. Their neural development occurs entirely within a THC-rich environment, which rewires their brains before they even take their first steps. Pediatric neurologists, those who are still lucid enough to record data, report significant delays in speech acquisition, spatial awareness, and emotional recognition. Infants do not crawl toward light or sound. They stare at shadows for hours, smiling without cause. Their first words, if they come at all, are not names or objects, but fragments of poetic nonsense. Glass, moon, soft thunder, the dreaming tree. The haze is not a drug to them. It is the only atmosphere they have ever known. In a kindergarten in Johannesburg, children are gathered for what used to be circle time. The teacher speaks in a soothing voice, but the story has no structure. It loops endlessly, blending animals, colors, and seasons into one continuous stream. The children do not seem confused. They sway gently, some tracing shapes in the air, others blinking out of sync. There is no comprehension, only reception. You observe a child named Theo, who can name every cloud shape, but cannot identify his own reflection in a mirror. Another girl, Luma, draws intricate spirals in her notebook, but cannot hold a crayon for more than 5 seconds without dropping it. Playgrounds are no longer sites of energy and laughter. They are filled with children who drift instead of run, who lie on swings, staring at the sky for hours, occasionally whispering to themselves. Slides are unused. Jungle gyms are quiet. The social bonds that once formed in childhood rivalries, friendships, role player, replaced by synchronized solitude. Children do not compete or cooperate. They coexist like flowers in a field, unaware of each other, but growing in parallel. Parents, too, are unequipped to guide them. Many are too deep in the fog themselves to notice the regression. They celebrate milestones that are no longer meaningful. A birthday remembered hours too late. A drawing mistaken for a poem. A babble interpreted as genius. Those who retain fragments of their former awareness mourn quietly. You speak to a mother in Buenos Aires who confesses she no longer knows if her son is asleep or awake. He just is, she says, her voice trembling, like the trees, like the sky. He breathes and smiles, but I do not know if he is here. In schools, testing becomes obsolete. There are no grades, no exams. Evaluations are replaced with emotional wellness check-ins that consist of drawing, humming, and scent-based memory exercises. Children are praised for stillness, not engagement. The goal is not education, but harmony. Classrooms become therapy zones, filled with sensory toys, soft lights, and calming soundscapes. Teachers are trained not to instruct, but to pacify. In this new world, intelligence is dangerous. Curiosity threatens peace, and so it is smothered gently, replaced with acceptance and ambient joy. Across the Pacific in Tokyo, you visit a learning center where children are taught entirely through touch and aroma. No books, no screens, only scents of lavender, mint, and orange, and textured walls designed to trigger emotional responses. A child named Kato is considered a prodigy because he can identify 7 different kinds of moss by scent alone. But he cannot write his name. nor does he know what a name is. He calls himself the soft one and speaks only in third person. His parents beam with pride. The long-term effects of this environmental saturation are devastating. Teenagers, once the drivers of rebellion and innovation, become extensions of the fog itself. Without exposure to sober reality, they form identities based not on beliefs or values, but on fleeting sensations. Conversations are made of shared hallucinations. They gather in silence, holding crystals to the moonlight and speaking in symbolic gestures. A 16-year-old boy in Madrid draws maps of cities that do not exist. A girl in Quebec paints faces with no eyes and calls them truth mirrors. These are not delusions. These are their truths. Technology companies attempt to capitalize on this shift. Neural interface headsets flood the market, designed to shape these dreamlike perceptions into interactive experiences. But without critical thinking, the devices become crutches, feeding loops of fantasy that replace memory entirely. Some teens plug in and never come back out. Their bodies survive, but their minds dissolve into landscapes only they can see. It becomes known as slipping. Parents call it a rite of passage. Some even join them. Governments attempt to measure the impact, but metrics lose meaning. IQ tests return random results. Cognitive benchmarks are abandoned. International summits devolve into guided meditations. Language fragments. New dialects emerge. In one region of Scandinavia, a teenage subculture communicates entirely through color-coded fabric wrapped around their arms. A red band means grief. A blue one means silence. No one speaks anymore. They float together, holding hands, waiting for feelings to arrive. But perhaps the most haunting development is this. The children of the fog no longer ask questions, not about the world, not about others, not even about themselves. There is no hunger for knowledge, no need to explore. They exist in a permanent state of now, where every moment is soft, every edge is rounded, and nothing feels urgent. They are not afraid, but they are also not alive in any way we once understood. Their laughter comes in pulses. Their cries sound like wind. Their dreams cannot be told apart from their waking lives. You find yourself in a forest commune in Oregon, where children run barefoot through moss and dew. One stops beside you, holding a jar filled with glowing insects. You ask him what they are. He blinks slowly and replies, "Yesterday's fire." You smile, unsure what that means, and he walks away. You realize you are not certain if that moment happened or if you imagined it. The lines between memory and perception blur, and for a terrifying instant, you feel it, the fog, claiming you. You shake it off, barely, but the children cannot. They are born into the haze. To them, this is not a corrupted world. It is the only world. They do not know what clarity is. They do not know they are high, and that is what makes it irreversible. But as the next generation fades into permanent haze, the few remaining sanctuaries of clean air become battlegrounds. When every breath is tainted, the fight for oxygen becomes the fight for survival itself. You descend into the heart of what was once a secured oxygen sanctuary in Geneva. The metal door closes behind you with a hiss, sealing out the golden, drugged haze that has transformed the outside world. Inside, artificial lights flicker dimly, powered by failing batteries and solar panels blocked by the ever-thickening cloud layer above. The air smells of plastic, sweat, and sterile hope. For a moment, clarity returns. Your heartbeat steadies. Your vision sharpens. You remember your name, but the silence is deafening. The facility is mostly empty. There are only 5 people left, slumped against walls or curled into sleeping bags, their eyes half-lidded. The filters are failing. The sanctuary is dying. In the first months after atmospheric saturation, governments, tech corporations, and fringe survivalist groups scrambled to build clean air sanctuaries. Some were high-tech, equipped with HEPA filtration, oxygen tanks, and AI-controlled airlocks. Others were hastily converted basements, bunkers, or underwater facilities. They were designed to house the lucid, protect critical infrastructure, preserve human memory. But air is insidious. You visit one such facility beneath the Alps, once home to hundreds of engineers, scientists, and policymakers. It is now a mausoleum of broken air vents and flickering monitors. You pass rows of empty beds and overturned medical carts. An oxygen tank lies abandoned near a doorway, its regulator hissing emptily. On the wall, a message has been scrawled in black ink. The haze found us anyway. The sanctuaries failed for 3 simple reasons. Supply chains collapsed, power grids became unstable, and maintenance required memory. Engineers forgot routines. Airlock sequences were left incomplete. Spare filters were misplaced or used incorrectly. In one Canadian dome, a technician replaced a scrubber cartridge with a roll of thermal insulation, thinking it was the same material. In Singapore, a vertical clean tower lost power after its solar backup was stolen by locals seeking warmth. By the time repairs were attempted, the occupants were already showing signs of cannabinoid-induced aphasia. They no longer recognized each other. They no longer recognized themselves. Those who sought refuge underground fared no better. Subterranean oxygen vaults, once considered the last hope, were compromised by unfiltered tunnel systems and water seepage. The haze, carried in fine aerosol form, infiltrated through groundwater, soil, even mold. You enter an abandoned subway bunker in New York. The walls drip with condensation. Tattered posters promise clarity for all. In the corner, 2 bodies lie intertwined beside a rusted oxygen generator, their faces frozen in peaceful smiles. They did not die screaming. They simply slipped away. Desperation turned innovative. Some survivors attempted to create mobile sanctuaries, vehicles outfitted with oxygen tanks, roaming across the landscape like modern arcs. But fuel became scarce, and each refueling meant stepping outside into the haze. Entire fleets vanished within weeks. Others built breathing helmets powered by rare batteries and scavenged CO2 scrubbers. But even the best helmets lasted only a few hours before becoming saturated or breaking down. A man in Warsaw walks the streets wearing a child's fish tank over his head, its inside fogged with condensation. He waves to you, grinning. In some parts of the world, wealthy enclaves remained protected longer. Ultra-secure compounds in Dubai, Switzerland, and Silicon Valley managed to isolate themselves for nearly a year. Their inhabitants lived in controlled environments with artificial air, hydroponic food, and algorithmic scheduling to maintain clarity. But even these elite sanctuaries eventually fell. All it takes is one broken seal, one shipment of unfiltered goods, one visitor who forgot their mask. The clarity zones began to crumble. Paranoia took root. People turned on each other, accusing friends and family of being the breached. Some were locked in closets, others were thrown out entirely. Lucidity became a threat, and isolation became a death sentence. Black market economies emerged around pure oxygen. Tanks were traded for gold, food, even human labor. Each is marked with symbols instead of words, because most buyers can no longer read. The vendor smiles, waving a price tag written in glowing paint. One breath, one memory. You watch as a woman trades her wedding ring for 10 minutes of clarity. She inhales deeply, looks around in horror at the crumbling buildings, then starts to cry. When the tank runs out, she stops crying. She smiles gently and walks away. Religious groups form around the concept of clean air. Some worship clarity as divine, believing that those who remain sober are chosen by a higher power. Others see the haze as a blessing, a return to Eden, and reject the use of filters entirely. In the mountains of Peru, a cult known as the Unclouded builds temples where oxygen is filtered through sacred rituals. But even they succumb. Their priest, once a respected scientist. You journey into a rainforest in Borneo where researchers once attempted to preserve native air purity. Their domes now lie shattered by storms and age. The trees themselves exhale tainted air, their leaves coated with resin. Birds fly in lazy loops. Insects hover in stillness. The jungle no longer buzzes, it hums, a low, rhythmic vibration like breathing. You realize there is no escape here either. The names of resistance groups vanish from collective knowledge. They become rumors, myths. Some say a clarity zone still exists in Antarctica, protected by wind and ice. Others claim there is an island where the fog cannot reach, but no one has ever proven these stories. And in a world without memory, stories are all that remain. You climb a tower in the center of Istanbul where a faded sign reads, "Pure thought lives here." Inside, the oxygen tanks have long since emptied. Walls are covered in drawings of faces, symbols, suns, and eyes. At the top, you find a man meditating in front of a broken filtration unit. He is surrounded by candles and mirrors. When you speak, he looks through you and says, "There is no such thing as clarity, only slower dreams." What was once a haven becomes a lounge. What was once a clinic becomes a temple. And as clean air becomes a distant memory, the environment begins to respond, but not with silence. The natural world is mutating under the influence of airborne cannabinoids, and it is transforming in ways no one anticipated. You stand at the edge of a dense forest in what used to be northern Oregon, where the trees seem taller, thicker, and more alive than they have ever been. But something feels wrong. The air is rich and heavy with the same signature scent found everywhere now. But here, it's not just the atmosphere. The cannabis saturation of the earth has not only reshaped human life, it has rewritten nature's code, and the green world is mutating. Botanists once warned of the potential for aggressive cross-pollination between cannabis and other plants under extreme exposure. Few took it seriously. No one predicted how fast it would happen. But once the haze blanketed the globe, plant species began absorbing and integrating the airborne cannabinoids into their own biology. At first, it was subtle. Sunflowers that drooped longer in the day, vines that twisted toward human presence. But within a year, entire forests began to exhibit traits never recorded in botanical science. Leaves glistened with unnatural oils. Roots grew above ground, spiraling toward air vents and shelter openings. Flowers pulsed with bioluminescent colors after sunset, and all of them exhaled low levels of psychotropic compounds, feeding the cycle. You step into the forest and feel the ground soft beneath your boots, not with rot, but with pulsing root networks that seem to respond to your steps. Every plant appears larger than it should be. Trees lean subtly toward you. Ferns sway in still air. At your feet, moss glows faintly when touched. A fruit, round and golden, falls from a tree and rolls to your boot. You pick it up. It smells sweet and familiar. And then you realize it's not a fruit at all. It's a pod. Inside is a cluster of gelatinous spores, rich with THC derivatives and unknown compounds. In the distance, a deer stumbles by, its pupils dilated, head swaying like it's drunk. It does not flee when it sees you. Wildlife behavior has shifted dramatically. Animals are no longer skittish. Birds perch on human shoulders, staring into faces without blinking. Wolves sleep openly on hiking trails. Bears wander through city ruins and nap in parking garages, unconcerned with territory or threat. But it is not peace, it is sedation. Cognitive testing done on surviving populations of primates reveals sharp declines in memory, navigation, and instinctual behavior. Some forget to eat. Others forget how to groom or care for their young. A troop of baboons in Kenya was observed sitting in a circle for hours, passing a single leaf among them as if it held meaning. It did not. Insects are not immune. Bees, known for their precise navigational ability, now fly in wide, lazy loops. Many cannot find their way back to their hives. Instead, they build new hives in illogical places, on glass windows, car windshields, even on the backs of grazing cattle. Their honey is tainted, sweet and dense, with cannabinoid traces. Small mammals, too, show signs of alteration. Squirrels forget where they bury their food. Foxes walk in circles. Rabbits approach predators without fear. Death in the animal kingdom no longer follows the rhythm of survival. It follows forgetfulness. And then there are the plants that fight back. In certain jungles of Southeast Asia, mutated cannabis ferns have been observed overtaking entire ecosystems. They grow rapidly, outcompeting native flora by releasing clouds of THC-heavy pollen that stun or sedate nearby species. Their roots penetrate deep into aquifers, draining water supplies to fuel faster expansion. In satellite images, these forests appear darker, denser, as if absorbing more than sunlight. They grow toward cities. They grow through fences. They grow into the bones of old skyscrapers and broken roads. In coastal regions, seaweed and algae begin blooming out of season, forming thick mats that release cannabinoid gases into the air above the ocean. Ships that pass through these green tides report hallucinations, loss of orientation, even cases of crew members jumping overboard without reason. Coral reefs bleach not from chemical confusion. Fish school in spiral patterns, chasing bubbles instead of prey. Divers must now wear multi-layered breathing systems or risk becoming lost in euphoric panic beneath the surface. Agriculture collapses under this silent invasion. Staple crops like wheat, rice, and corn begin to exhibit hybrid mutations, absorbing THC from soil and air. Their growth becomes unpredictable. Corn stalks lean sideways. Wheat pulses with resin. Farmers report strange behaviors in livestock. Cows refusing to move. Chickens laying misshapen eggs. Pigs that sleep for days. In one haunting instance in the Netherlands, a dairy farm is found abandoned, its herd standing motionless around a water trough. gazing at their own reflections, never blinking. Attempts to genetically engineer resistant crops backfire. In a lab in Tel Aviv, researchers develop a THC impervious soybean, but when planted, it triggers a violent immune response in the soil microbiome. The ground turns sour, killing the plant and leaching toxins into nearby rivers. The earth itself appears confused. Microorganisms that once supported life now reject it. Fungal networks grow erratically, forming visible patterns in the shapes of spirals, eyes, and limbs. No one can explain it. Cities adapt by sealing rooftops with polymer domes and creating vertical gardens designed to be grown indoors under artificial air, but the seeds themselves are compromised. You visit a dome in Johannesburg where lettuce grows upside down and tomatoes vibrate when touched. A technician tells you the soil is dreaming. You cannot tell if he's joking, and yet there is beauty. Fields of grass sway in rhythm with each other as if dancing. Forests glow gently at night. Rivers reflect colors not present in the sky. The world is transforming, not into a wasteland, but into something alien, lush, sensuous, and wrong. Nature has not died. It has simply evolved in the Haze's image. This new ecosystem is no longer indifferent to humanity. It affects you, responds to you, draws you in. The plants sing in high frequencies, inaudible but felt in the bones. The animals look at you like they know something you do not. The wind tastes like nostalgia, and the longer you stay in these zones, the harder it becomes to leave. Some survivors theorize that the planet is healing itself, using the haze as a mechanism to slow humans down, erase memory, eliminate aggression. Others believe Earth has simply been hijacked by a runaway chemical process, transforming life into a shared hallucination from which there is no waking. But the debate does not matter anymore. Discussion requires dialogue. Dialogue requires attention, and attention is fading everywhere. You climb a hill near what was once a scientific preserve in the Rockies and look down at the valley below. Where there used to be towns, there is now a soft green carpet, broken only by the occasional tower or abandoned vehicle. Birds fly in slow, perfect circles above a glowing river. A herd of elk walk single file across a field, their antlers tangled with vines. And overhead, the sky pulses faintly, not with weather, but with light refracted through atmospheric cannabinoids so dense they alter sunlight itself. You breathe it all in. You forget what came before. But in a world where nature has embraced the haze, only those who abandon it completely can hope to stay clear. Now, a new breed of resistance emerges, humans who enhance themselves with machines in a desperate fight for clarity. You descend a concrete stairwell deep beneath what used to be Tel Aviv's tech district. The doors open to a humming subterranean hall bathed in sterile white light. Unlike the outside world, there is no scent here, no earthy sweetness, no haze, just cool, filtered air and silence. On either side of the hallway, transparent pods glow faintly, each one occupied by a person lying motionless, a thin mask strapped to their face. Above every pod, a monitor displays vital signs and a timer counting backward. These are not sleep chambers. They are oxygen hibernation units, refuge for those who still chase clarity. This is where the last resistors of the haze live. After the global saturation, when all natural environments were compromised and sanctuaries began to collapse, a new class of survivors emerged. They were not farmers, nor nomads. They were engineers, biohackers, and rogue scientists. People who had access to advanced technology, who refused to let their minds dissolve into the fog. They became known as the Lucids, and their salvation was not found in nature, but in machines. You walk past a woman fitted with a neural filter embedded directly into her temple. It glows, a pale blue, pulsing with her heartbeat. This implant regulates chemical intrusion, identifying THC molecules in the bloodstream and deploying a microdose of an antipsychotropic counteragent. It does not restore full clarity, but it grants just enough to remain aware in the haze. These lucids do not breathe the same air as the rest of the world. They generate their own, deep within hidden labs and corporate bunkers. They design closed-loop oxygen systems, worn on their backs or built into their clothing. Some wear lightweight filtration cloaks lined with AI-regulated breathing ducts. Others have installed bronchial implants that chemically deconstruct harmful particles before they ever reach the brain. Each method is risky, expensive, and unstable, but they are the only options left. Clarity is no longer a default state. It is a privilege built through wires, chips, and recycled molecules. You speak to a man named Rafi, a former neurologist who now leads one of the largest lucid outposts in Cairo. His voice is mechanical, processed through a throat modulator after years of damage from makeshift oxygen recycling. He tells you, "We are not trying to change the world. That chance is gone. We are trying to remember it." His team operates what remains of a memory vault, a digital archive of pre-haze knowledge, history, language, and emotion. It is their belief that once the last lucid mind dies, the world will forget it ever knew anything at all. But clarity comes at a cost. Prolonged exposure to artificial air without rest leads to chronic fatigue, emotional blunting, and, in some cases, hallucinations more vivid than those caused by THC. The implants can malfunction. Some explode under strain. A failed oxygen mix can induce seizures or coma. And the worst side effect of all, total rejection. Some bodies simply cannot adapt. Their immune systems turn on the implants, and their minds unravel faster than any haze could have done. Yet the lucids continue. In Amsterdam, you visit a tower where neural implants are mass-produced through black market fabrication hubs. People line up in silence, trading scavenged tech, old currency, or even memories recorded through cortical scanners for a chance at installation. The wait time is 7 days. Most do not make it. Some disappear into the haze. Others die in line, lungs failing from withdrawal symptoms. Those who do survive walk away with glassy eyes and steady breath, but they are changed, detached, aware, but unable to connect. Clarity, they learn, is isolating. To combat the loneliness, lucids develop augmented environments called clarity zones. These are digitally enhanced safe spaces where holograms restore structure, language, and simulated human interaction. Inside one such dome in Prague, you experience a recreation of Earth circa 2015. Children laugh in playgrounds, teachers hold classes, people shake hands, but none of it is real. Militarized factions of lucids begin to form. They arm themselves not with weapons, but with clarity grenades, canisters of pressurized oxygen mixed with lucidity enhancers. These are deployed during raids on haze-saturated zones to recover rare technology or rescue children born with low tolerance. One such operation in Johannesburg results in a standoff. Lucids storm a government nursery to extract infants, but the caregivers, deep in the fog, mistake them for demons. Screams erupt. A child cries. But within seconds, the grenades are deployed and silence returns. The air clears. The caregivers stop screaming. They look around in horror, seeing the truth for the first time in years. Not all lucids are heroes. In fact, many are tyrants. In Mexico City, a clarity oligarchy forms, where only the wealthy can afford continuous filtration. Their neighborhoods are enclosed in biodomes, patrolled by drones, and enforced with retinal scanners. Inside, everything runs like clockwork. Markets, schools, even news. Outside, people drift like ghosts. The oligarchs call it the split. One world with time, purpose, and memory. The other without. Lucid leadership is fracturing. Some want to restore clarity to everyone, believing it is a moral duty. Others believe the haze is evolution, and only those strong enough to resist it deserve to remain aware. Tensions rise. Sabotage becomes common. Oxygen tanks are poisoned. Neural implants hacked. A lab in Siberia is destroyed by insiders who declare the pursuit of clarity a betrayal of peace. In leaked footage, one scientist records a final message: the haze is love. You are afraid of losing your pain. And yet, the lucids endure. Not because they believe they can reverse the world's descent, but because some truths are worth remembering, even if no one else shares them. They walk the streets in full gear, helmets hissing softly, eyes scanning for signs of others like them. When they find someone who stares too long at a wall, they offer a breath from their reserve tank. Just one breath. Sometimes it is enough to bring a name back, a memory, a tear. You return to the surface, stepping out of the bunker into the saturated world. The haze wraps around you instantly. It is warmer now, softer. Your implant hums. The air tastes like nothing. You look up and see a child watching you from a rooftop, her eyes wide, her fingers stained with red paint. You wave. She does not move. She is part of the haze now. But you, for now, are not. Yet not even machines can protect the mind forever. In the final stages of exposure, reality itself begins to bend. Identities fracture. Hallucinations become permanent. The haze is no longer a background presence. It is the world. And inside this world, people are beginning to dissolve, not physically, but mentally, psychologically. You find yourself wandering through the skeletal remains of Berlin's cultural district, where what used to be art galleries and theaters are now repurposed hallucination dens. The streets look normal, at least at first glance. Then you notice the people. They are talking to reflections, waving at invisible birds, having conversations with chairs. No one reacts to you, because to them, you may not even be real. They are trapped within layered fantasies. Their minds can no longer distinguish from truth. This is not traditional madness. It is cannabinoid psychosis, an emergent neurological collapse born from prolonged, involuntary THC exposure. Unlike temporary hallucinations from high doses, this is a full rewiring of consciousness. The brain, under constant bombardment from psychoactive compounds, begins to generate entire realities. Each individual creates their own world, a private simulation with unique rules, memories, and logic. And once a person enters it, they are gone. You pass a man dressed as a 19th century naval captain who bows and calls you Empress of the Skies. He then walks into a fountain, and salutes the pigeons. No one stops him. Medical facilities are overwhelmed. Those that remain functional describe patients exhibiting dream anchor loss, a condition where people lose the ability to separate imagination from memory. A woman in São Paulo believes she gave birth to the moon. A teenager in Stockholm insists she is inside a movie being filmed from behind her eyes. A man in Atlanta refuses to speak except in rhymes, claiming anything else will make the sun go blind. You visit one of these hospitals. The walls are padded with sound-absorbing foam, not to reduce noise, but to prevent echoes because echoes trigger paranoia in the haze-drenched mind. At first, it was thought that these were isolated psychotic breaks, but soon, entire communities began forming around shared hallucinations. In Warsaw, a neighborhood believes they live underwater. People move slowly, speak in bubbles, and simulate swimming as they walk. In Bangkok, an entire district has adopted an identity as time travelers. They mark days by invented calendar systems and celebrate the arrival of each new timeline with parades. They do not think they are pretending. Their psychosis is synchronized. And in a world without memory or resistance, these delusions replace reality. Language fragments, words become unstable. A sentence might begin in one tongue and end in another. People invent new dialects composed of emotional cues, blinking patterns, or even tactile gestures. You overhear a group in Nairobi communicating by clapping and humming at different frequencies. When asked what they are saying, they look confused and respond, "We are listening to the inside music." Logic is gone. Cause and effect are replaced with emotional intuition. "I feel like it's raining, so it must be," says a man, staring at a perfectly clear sky. One of the most terrifying effects of this psychosis is memory drift. People remember things that never happened. Couples argue about past vacations that neither of them ever took. Families gather for birthdays on the wrong day for people who do not exist. Some remember being multiple people at once. A man in Canada recalls dying in a fire, despite being alive. He describes it in detail, what the air tasted like, the way his skin melted. His wife sits beside him, stroking his hair, whispering, "But you are ash now, so sleep." Relationships become impossible to sustain. Without shared reality, connection collapses. People fall in love with hallucinations. They grieve imaginary losses. You see a woman holding a funeral for a fictional brother, her eyes swollen from days of crying. No one corrects her. They attend the funeral, each assigning the dead man a different face. A man proposes marriage to a tree he believes is his childhood sweetheart. The tree leans slightly in the wind. He takes it as a yes. Religions mutate. The haze becomes divine in some regions, a holy presence that blesses the faithful with visions. In Rome, a new cult believes that God communicates through visual distortions in glass. They worship cracked mirrors and melted windows, believing the shifting light patterns to be scripture. In other areas, people see gods in the haze itself. Giant eyes, glowing beasts, impossible figures floating through the sky. These are not hallucinations in the traditional sense. They are communal mythologies, formed in real time by chemically hijacked brains seeking meaning. The law is meaningless now. Courtrooms are arenas of fantasy. Defendants forget what they are accused of. Judges believe themselves to be kings or prophets. You watch a trial in New Delhi where the accused recites a poem about fish while the prosecutor eats flower petals. The verdict is never given. Everyone simply forgets why they are there and walks away. In prisons, inmates blend with guards. The concept of guilt cannot survive when no one can hold a coherent thought from 1 hour to the next. Technology does not help. AI systems still run in some places, desperately trying to maintain coherence. They broadcast news to people who no longer understand words. They send reminders for tasks no one remembers assigning. One digital assistant named Clara repeats a single phrase in different languages every day. You are real. You were real. No one listens. The screens are covered with paint, scarves, and flowers. Information has become noise, and yet there is no panic, no violence, just confusion and compliance. The psychosis has removed fear. Even when people suffer, they do so with a smile. A man in Madrid lies in a street, bleeding from a wound he cannot feel, insisting he is swimming in red wine. Bystanders cheer him on. A woman sets her clothes on fire because she believes she is shedding her cocoon. She thanks the flames before collapsing. You find a room in an abandoned museum where hundreds of notebooks are piled on the floor. Each one is filled with writing, drawings, equations. None of them make sense. Pages filled with circles, eyes, repeated words like drift and soft and before. You realize these are attempts to anchor thought. Someone tried to hold on. Someone tried to remember. But in the end, they too succumbed. Perhaps the worst symptom of all is what researchers once called identity delamination, the complete unraveling of selfhood. People forget who they are. Then they become someone else, then no one. Some refer to themselves in the past tense while still alive. Others invent entirely new lives each day. You meet a man who insists he was once a bird, then a clock, then a city. His voice is soft, his eyes hollow. I miss being the city, he says. People used to walk on me. Cannabinoid psychosis is not madness in the cinematic sense. It is not loud or theatrical. It is slow erosion, like a painting left in the rain. The colors run, the lines blur, and eventually the image disappears, but the canvas remains. The people remain, smiling, breathing, living, but they are not who they once were, not anymore. And now, as you walk through these streets, your own mind begins to splinter. You smell the fog, and it smells like childhood. You see a dog, and it speaks. You blink, and the world shifts a few degrees to the left. You try to say your name, but it sounds wrong in your mouth. You ask yourself, have you already broken? Have you always been broken? Now imagine this on a global scale, every human drifting further from self until nothing remains. The final chapter is not about survival or resistance. It is about what happens when humanity forgets itself entirely and vanishes into the haze. You awaken in a city you do not recognize, though you're certain you have been here before. The skyline is unfamiliar, like a dream reconstructed by memory fragments. Buildings lean gently, not from damage, but from design, curved to follow the wind. The air is sweet, not intoxicating anymore, just omnipresent. The haze is no longer something separate from the world. It is the world. And you, like everyone else, have become part of it. There are no screams, no alarms, just the rustle of leaves, the hum of distant power generators still running without purpose. They simply nod in passing, eyes glazed with serenity. The concept of history has dissolved. Time is no longer linear. People refer to days as the soft one, the blue, or the wide. Calendars are relics now. used as art canvases or paper fans. Museums are filled with objects no one understands. A phone held like a seashell, a book read upside down. Language is poetic at best, symbolic at worst. A man points to the sky and says, "The silence is falling." You nod, even though you don't know what he means. You visit what remains of a government building in Rio de Janeiro. Inside, children paint faces on the walls with berry juice, singing melodies with no words. Adults sit cross-legged, listening. There is no leadership, no elections, no order, and yet there is no conflict either. The haze has removed the ambition to dominate, the memory of injustice, and the anger that once sparked revolution. Without history, there can be no comparison. Without comparison, no one feels lesser or greater. It is not utopia. It is amnesia disguised as peace. Science fades without questions. The last laboratories have become sanctuaries, filled with blinking equipment and people who treat wires like prayer beads. You enter one in Seoul. A man carefully places test tubes into a circle on the floor and whispers to them. A woman stares into a microscope that is no longer connected to anything. The desire to discover has been replaced by the need to witness. Technology operates blindly. AI servers still respond to input, but no one types commands. Robots continue maintenance routines, unaware their creators no longer care what is being maintained. Relationships blur. Family, as a concept, is diluted. People gather in clusters based on proximity, not blood. Children are raised by whoever happens to be nearby. There is no ownership, no jealousy. Lovers embrace without names. There is tenderness, but no depth. Without memory, love becomes a moment-to-moment comfort, like warmth or light. You witness a couple sitting in a park, holding hands in silence. When asked how long they've been together, they both respond, always, though they do not know each other's names. One stands up and walks away. The other does not turn to watch. Even death is forgotten. Funerals cease. Grief fades before it can form. You find a body in a garden, flowers growing around it, undisturbed. People walk by, pausing to admire the bloom. No one asks who it was. Some communities float their dead into rivers, not as ceremony, but because it feels gentle. The dead are not mourned. They are returned to the haze, their identities slipping away like breath on glass. They build altars from scraps, glowing bottles, polished mirrors, speaker boxes humming with static. In a once-abandoned mosque in Istanbul, a circle of men and women chant a single syllable, Ra. When asked what it means, they giggle. It is the word, one says, the only one we need. Sacred texts are used as coloring books. Temples echo with lullabies instead of sermons. Divinity is not denied, it is just forgotten, replaced by the pleasant hum of being. In Tokyo, glowing kites fill the night sky, guided by no hands. The world has not ended. It has simply wandered off the path and forgotten to return. Institutions are ruins, but people do not notice. They live in the remains of old systems without trying to revive them. A train station in Prague operates with no schedule. People arrive, sit quietly, and leave on foot. A university in Toronto has become a sculpture garden. Textbooks stacked into towers, lecture halls filled with people staring at light shows on ceilings. The idea of learning has shifted into a passive absorption of sensation. Knowledge is no longer cumulative, it is ambient. And then, one day, You forget why you came here. You sit by a fountain that sings when wind passes through its pipes. A child approaches and hands you a red string. You thank her, though you do not know the words. You tie it around your wrist. It feels like a promise. Behind you, people laugh. Ahead of you, mist rolls through the streets. You feel light, soft, gone. The last memory you have is of a voice, not your own, whispering, "You are not lost. You are just wide open." And you believe it. The world, now fully saturated, no longer remembers that it was once awake. There are no records, no resistance, no need. Humanity has not died. It has diffused. And this is why you will not survive. But if you could see what you've become, would you want to return? Or is forgetting the only way to find peace? So now you understand. This was never about cannabis, not really. This was about what happens when the very air that sustains us begins to reprogram us. When each breath rewires thought, reshapes memory, and dissolves the very foundation of identity. It was not loud, not violent, not sudden. It was slow, gentle. It arrived with a smile, spoke in a whisper, and made you forget there was anything to fear. In a future where the sky no longer brings clarity, where even nature turns into a vessel of intoxication, resistance becomes a kind of madness, and lucidity becomes loneliness. The more you fight to stay awake, the more you realize you are alone. The rest of the world is dreaming, and the dream is endless. Humanity didn't burn out. It faded, slipped into itself, smiled as it sank. And perhaps that is the most terrifying part of all. No screams, no last stand, no dramatic fall. Just the collective sigh of a species choosing, not through decision, but through influence, to forget everything it ever built. Would you survive this world? No, because in a place where the fog replaces thought, where history is erased one breath at a time, and where the very act of remembering becomes a rebellion, survival is not a matter of strength or intelligence. It is a question of identity. And when identity is gone, so are you. This was your time travel glimpse. You arrived with a name. You leave with only the haze. If this journey made you think, even for a moment, about how fragile our minds truly are, how delicate reality can be when the very air we breathe turns against us, then share this video. Comment your thoughts if you remember them. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring impossible futures. And most of all, stay lucid for as long as you can.